All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Tuesday Night Live. If you noticed, I'm not playing the typical intro right now, and that is because something's going on with my computer. Of course, I've got an amazing guest on today. His name is Kofuzi, as you know him on YouTube, Michael Ko, as he goes by in real life. But yeah, of course, something like this would happen on a day like this where I get someone who everyone knows and is probably tuning in to see. But that's okay. We're just going to roll with it. So I've got some questions for him, but definitely put your questions in the comments below as well, because I'm going to be reading through those and I'll be picking out ones, setting them aside to ask as well. And yeah, I think this is going to be a good one. So I do somehow miraculously, one of the video files that I normally play seems like it's working. So we're going to roll that. And as soon as we come back, I'll be live with Kofuzi. All right, so here he is, Kofuzi in the house.
What's going on, everybody?
What's up? Well, thank you so much for
you,
joining, man. This was awesome. I think it was such a treat to meet you in person out at Western States, and it was totally by chance too, because I saw you, your stories and everything, popping up in my Instagram feed, and I knew you were there. And I was looking for you and everything, and then you just found me on the track, right before Jim was coming in.
Yeah, I mean, likewise, it was a real treat for me to meet you too, because we've been interacting with each other, in comments and in Instagram, but we never actually met in person, so that was totally cool to do. And having watched all your 2 days before the race, the day before the race, and now your race footage videos that you've just been putting out, which have been fantastic coverage, by the way. I'm looking at all the places that you went, and I'm I was either there right before you or right after you. So we spent the entire weekend until hour 14 and a half of this race, just missing each other. And so finally, when I saw you, I was right? I got to go chase him down. I'm going to run over there. I'm going to say hi before I miss him, because I've already spent the entire weekend not running into you, because I knew you were going to be out here. So I'm glad that I did that and we got a chance to meet.
Yeah, man, I am definitely glad as well too. So just for maybe the one or two people that are watching this that do not know who you are, I'll give a little bit of a rundown of what I know, and then you fill in the blanks. So you are an entrepreneur, a YouTuber, shoe and gear reviewer, you're a runner. You're also now an ultra runner. Triathlete soon, maybe. Family man. What did I miss? What else you got going on in your life?
Well, I'm not a triathlete yet. I've signed up for one. I haven't competed or finished one yet. So I feel once you finish one, then maybe you could say, I know people are if you run, you're a runner, that kind of thing, to be very inclusive. But I feel if I can survive the swim, then I feel I could call myself maybe a triathlete. But the only other thing that's in there is I do have my first steeplechase coming up at the end of the month. I might be able to add steepler to that list of seemingly unconnected items on a resume.
That's awesome. So what is all in a steeplechase? Because I've seen it on TV, but wouldn't be able to actually give a rundown of what's going on during it.
Yeah, it's a 3,000 meter race on the track. But instead of running a 3,000 meter race, there are barriers. And they're kind of like hurdles. They're hurdle height, but they're more a kind of a giant, the trail is closed, the pathway is closed, that kind of barrier, almost like a sawhorse kind of thing. But there's a very specific one that's built for the steeplechase. There are several of those around the track. And on one of them, right before the home stretch, instead of going all the way around the top of the curve, you kind of cut it a little bit, you cut across. And there's one more barrier and a water pit that you have to jump through, and it's of a size that you can't avoid getting in the water. You're going to get wet in there a little bit. It's a very strange race. I've always thought it's a very strange race, and it's what's always kind of drawn me to it. And this year I was like, I'm going to do it. I may be of the age where it's more likely that I'll blow a knee than finish, but I'm going to do it. I'm not going to blow a knee. I'm going to go after it. I've entered into a Masters steeple, so I'll be picking on people my own size.
Yeah.
And or I won't have to run against like sub elites and elite athletes. I'll be running against my contemporaries. So that'll be happening at the end of the month.
So how do you do that? Do you just go like online and you find like you just search for like Masters track meet or something and you sign up?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So like I feel like what I want to do, like because I was like, I just want to do this. How do I do this? Like there's no way that they're going to just let like a person off the street and try this.
Right.
But they will.
I can imagine that would have some. Yeah.
If you pay the entry fee, they'll let you do it. And so
Wow.
I did it. The one that I signed up for is a USATF event. So I had to be a USATF member. So I signed up for a USATF membership, which I'm happy to do. And then I signed up for an entry fee for this track meet coming up at the end of the month. And they're going to let me run. They're going to let me line up. Like they didn't ask for a seed time or anything like that. They were just like, they're just letting me be an adult and like sign up for it, sign the waiver and go.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Man, that's cool.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, but I think it's going to be funny.
That's cool. So I want to say, first of all, like maybe the first to congratulate you on hitting 80,000 because your Social Blade says that in about 2 days you're going to hit 80,000 subscribers on YouTube. So congratulations on that. And also, like, as I was just browsing around your channel, I went really far back and watched a couple from years ago. But you've got over 2,000 videos on there as well. So that's pretty crazy, man.
Well, thank you. Thank you. It's weird to think that like the 80,000 number is like right around the corner. For a long time, I thought like if I hit 30, I'll probably stop because I'll have accomplished everything that I want to or can possibly accomplish in YouTube by then, and I'll just be done.
Yeah.
And so to like everything basically after like 30,000 is just gravy for me at this point.
Yeah. So what was that about the 30,000 number? Did it take you, because it seemed like you've been doing it for about 5 years or so. Is that right?
Yeah, about.
So did it take a long time to get there and you just thought it was unattainable, or where'd that number come from?
Yeah, that number came like I was looking at 30,000 when I was probably at like 16 or 12 or something like that. And I just remember how hard it was to break 10,000. It took so long. And I felt like I'd grown so much, but yet so little at the same time. And I was just like, what's like I was like, there was a moment where I was like, what's the end game? Like at what point, like, where does this go? What happens with this? And I was trying to like envision that. And, which is not something I normally do. With most of like the things that I'm interested in, I try not to think of it that far out. But for like in a moment of weakness, I was looking out at that number, and I think at that point, like that was like Jamie of Jamie Reviews was like a little bit past that number, and all the people that I kind of like was kind of like looking at and and admiring from afar, they were either there or past that number. And so I felt like that seems to be a number where the big people are at. And so it just felt like, all right, well, that's a big number. Once I get a big number, then what else? What do I do at that point? I don't even know. And so like, I couldn't see what it looked like after that. And so it just, for me, a lot of times when I can't see that, I think that's the end. That's the finish line. So you probably just hang it up at that point. So that's kind of where that comes from.
Yeah. No, I can definitely identify with that. Like just, every once in a while you do like start thinking about like, well, what's the actual goal here? What's the end game? And I mean, for me, and I don't want to speak for you, but like, I just, it's fun making videos, and I mean, whatever happens to that number happens. But I try not to focus on it. But yeah, congratulations, by the way, for very soon, about ready to hit. So when you started, like, what was the goal, like, right at the beginning? Like, were you using a cell phone? Like, what type of camera were you using?
I was using primarily a GoPro.
Mm,
I was using a Motorola G4 as a cell phone. It was
nice.
a terrible phone. Um, but I was using that because I was like, it was the phone that I had. It was the
Mm-hmm.
camera that I had. And then I was occasionally using, I'm trying to think of, I may have had a big camera as well at the time. I think I did, but I'm not sure if I was yet at the Sony. I was like I had the A6300 at some point in there. It might not
Yeah.
have, it may or may not have been right away. But like the original impetus, as far as like all of this was, it was just, um, it was like a weekend barbecue at my running buddy's house.
Mm,
And this is when all our kids were like really, really super young.
yeah.
And I was like, you know what I want to do with a GoPro? Like I did, this was before I owned a GoPro. I was like, everyone takes a GoPro. This would have been like my daughter would have been like 2 to 4 years old. So this would have been like 14, 2015, that time period. And I was like, when you think of GoPro footage, you think of like big wave surfing, just like deep powder snowboarding, urban, freestyle skate.
Yeah.
But you know what I want to do with it? I want to put it on the back of a big wheel and watch a 2-year old like just go to town on this thing. So like I always thought like, what is everyone take the technology and do something that people aren't doing with it, and kind of like turn it not on its head, use it exactly how other people are using it, but in a way that other people aren't using it yet. And so like I remember years ago when I just started like making my first couple of GoPro videos, this is when Google like started making 360, like was getting into like, should we make 360 cameras?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I'm not sure if it was Google or there was some point where there was like a contest where it was like, tell us what you want to do with a 360 rig. And it was like, we'll take a whole bunch of GoPros, put it together, and we'll use software to like stitch 6 GoPros into a 360 file. It was like it was like the early days of 360 cameras. And it was a contest like, tell us what you want to do with this. And I was like, I want to take it to a kid's 5th birthday party with like confetti and kids jumping on trampolines and just have like the pandemonium of a kid's birthday party in 360 and in slow motion at the same time. And so like that was like my idea years ago. I didn't win the contest, so I didn't get a free 360 rig.
Yeah.
But like even back then, that's where I was thinking like we got to turn this on its head because people are using it for all these things that people can watch, but I want to use it for things that people are doing, so
Mm.
make it more relatable. And
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
time I was doing like, I was my channel was more like urban dad, city dad kind of thing. And so I was trying to think of like how do we use it for like, this is like the next greatest home video camera. And so how do we do that? So that was the original angle. But then,
Yeah.
ultimately the channel shifted to running content. But like the ultimate concept was like, what is everyone else doing? Let's do the opposite of that,
Mm-hmm.
whatever opposite means. We have to figure out what opposite means. That's the
Mm-hmm.
tricky part, but just don't do what everyone else is doing.
Nice. That's cool, man. And then it transitioned into running. And since then, doesn't really seem like you've looked back. You've pretty much, I mean, you're one of the probably first couple people that pop up when anybody searches for any type of running shoes or gear or anything. So like, what's that like? Like right now, is that like, are you in your sweet spot? Is this exactly what you want to be doing with YouTube, or do you see yourself bringing more things into the channel?
Yeah, well, I think that right now I'm not at a crossroads, but at a point where I need to I've been asking that question, right? So I feel like I've been at a point for a while where if I put out a review of a shoe, it'll come up pretty high in the terms of the search results. And even if people aren't looking for a shoe, if they're looking for shoes, something that I've made will show up. So I feel like I've kind of established myself in this little tiny corner of the internet. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's great. And I'm like, so you see other people that have done that before. And then we're like, all right, I'm tired of that, or I don't want to do as much of that. And I really want to, now that I have a foothold of attention, do other things,
Mm-hmm.
And so I've seen a lot of other people that are doing that, but I don't have other things that I want to do. I still like
Yeah.
making the shoe videos.
Yeah.
And I still I make so many videos that I've created room for other experimentation. So I don't have to like, one is not coming at the expense of the other at the moment. And so I'm kind of enjoying where I am. And, either it's gonna continue or I'll get bored. And I'm not sure which one's gonna happen first.
Yeah.
But for the moment, I'm still full steam ahead in terms of the shoe reviews. I like it because it's a way of um, kind of like, feeding the beast, the YouTube beast, so to speak, in terms of like you got to put out content that gets views, that gets clicks, um, to make the algorithm happy. But it's also a really nice way of doing two things. One is to just draw in people that aren't watching me already. And so like the more like away from like running shoe review videos that I get, like the more like those videos only seem to reach my core audience, like the people that like if I never reviewed another running shoe, would probably still watch me anyway. Like there's like that ultimate core audience
Yeah.
that's there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, but there's not everyone's in there, and that's
Mm-hmm.
totally cool. That's totally okay. And
Yeah.
so like there's some people that don't like those kinds of video and like the review videos or the versus videos or the running gear videos or whatever it is. And so like, I think that by having a frequent production schedule, like publishing multiple times a week, it lets me like experiment and touch all these different bases and speak to different audiences. So like I think
Yeah.
early on, I think it really hurt my growth because YouTube was like, I don't know what this channel is. How do I push this? How do I know who to send this to?
Mm-hmm.
But now it's enough that like I feel like if YouTube is like, all right, runners seem to like this guy, not everyone, but some runners seem to like it. So we'll try it. We'll try
Yeah.
it to a new person, see if they like it or not. And if they like it, we'll just feed more of it to them. If not, we won't. So like um, that's kind of the position where I'm at now. So I'm very content with how things are right at the moment.
Nice. Yeah, I find that's kind of like a line that you have to, I mean, from my like short experience in this as well, making things that you want to make, but then also making things that are searchable so that people can find you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really hard to do both, well, I think,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, let's see. There's a bunch of people in the watching right now, a bunch of people in the chat. Just want to give a few shout outs. Mandy, thanks for showing up today. Christy Wiley's here. Hey guys, doing a tempo run on my treadmill while I watch this.
Cool.
We also got Chase the Summits in the house. Dave,
Hey.
it says this thumbnail pic for the stream has me realizing that Ryan is way taller than I expected, or Kofuzi is much smaller than I expected, or Ryan is a giant. So, and then there's actually, since then, there's been a bunch of comments about height. And somebody asked, and there's guesses going on. There's a couple people. Shannon says, my guess is Ko is 5'11 and Ryan is 6'3. So how close was Shannon on that?
I think she's pretty close. I'm 5'10" and change. So like, I mean, I don't know how much
nice.
I've shrank over the years. So like, that's pretty much spot on.
Nice. Yeah. And I'm 6'2". So Shannon, you're almost dead on right there. And then Danielle Henney is here. Says, did Kofuzi get the scoop that Jim is no longer training with the Coconino Cowboys? Were you the first to break that?
I mean, you know what? Here's the thing. And so like in that video, I was like, you know what, guys, I apologize because I'm not like the most skilled at interviewing professional athletes. that's that's the subject that I'm talking about. People are like, "Oh, you did great." He was really like open and charming. I'm like, I wasn't talking about whether I felt like he was comfortable or not. That was the question I'm talking about because he was just like, there was two things. One was, I felt like Wahoo had helped had set up the interview for me. So I'm like, all right, let's
Mm-hmm.
talk about him and Wahoo. I thought he'd be excited to talk about the exercise bike, the the Zwift bike that they make,
Yeah.
and then it's not a Zwift bike, but it's basically the Zwift bike and also the
It's
rival.
for riding on Zwift, basically. And
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. And so like I wanted to talk about that. And he's like, well, I've been brought on to really focus on the running. And so I was like, oh, okay. So sorry, I didn't quite pick up on that or know that ahead of time. So I felt bad that I felt like I was going down a path he didn't want to go. And so I felt a little bit like, awkward, like that's a rookie mistake. But then the other thing was like, I was like Coconino Cowboys, I've seen him in videos where he's pacing some of his, the other guys and he's wearing the gear and the merch.
Yeah.
And then, I asked him about it is part of this idea of like, will we see like a Maker's Cup kind of thing, to borrow like a NASCAR term, um, in ultra running? Like, would we ever see that? That's kind of like where I wanted to go, like kind of take like a little bit of NASCAR, a little bit of cross country teams, and like merge that into trail running, which I think would be fantastic and help, the story get beyond just who came in first. And so, he was really interested in talking about kind of other ideas to make ultra running more interesting. But then he was talking about how like, well, those guys they have their own goals and they're doing their own thing. And I was like, oh man, did he make an Instagram post about that? What's that all about? I just didn't know how to like dive further into that because I
Uh-huh.
didn't want to be like, yeah, like, did you miss it? Like it was a giant thing on the internet like 2 months ago, and I don't want to talk about it. I didn't want to like make him mad, So
Yeah.
I was really surprised to hear that because my understanding was like, I mean, the last in 2020, they had like gone in like three musketeers, all for one and one for all. Like they were like pacing each other to make sure everyone got golden tickets. They
Yep.
had done it. They were ready to go, and it was going to be the storyline, not a Jim storyline, but a Coconino Cowboy storyline. And I was all for it. And then we never got that race. And I was thinking, all right, 2021, is he going to go out with Jared? Is he going to go out with Senseman and like with those guys as a pack, pull them along, guide them along in terms of like, here's where we push, here's where we don't. I didn't know if we were going to see any of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of wanted to go into that too, but like the way he answered it, I was just like, oh, this I'm not talented enough as an interviewer to know how to navigate this. So I had to kind of just leave it there,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
No, I feel you on that. I mean, I don't know how I would have handled that either, because it was kind of a little bit of a surprise to hear him come out and say something like that. Because like you said, years, for the last couple of years he has been. But I also kind of have noticed that he's been on his own a lot more and not talking about it as much. But I don't think there was ever any like official like split or anything. I think I just chalked it up to, okay, when you are that great, like you kind of have to train on your own, and training with others, maybe it's not the best, I don't know, but,
Well, I mean, the other thing was just like, well, was it just the fact that he was hurt and so like didn't want to
yeah.
be public and on
Hmm.
Strava and all that, and so like at that point maybe that started a rift. I don't.
Yeah.
All speculation. Like I have no idea. There was a lot of stuff that happened in 2020, and a lot of those guys kind of, had to do. Everyone had to do what they had to do to survive in 2020. I'm not
Hmm.
saying anything bad happened, and I'm not trying to like justify any sort of bad behavior or imply that there was bad behavior, but like, there was, all, it through all things that were kind of in motion, everything kind of paused. And so I could see there being some momentum lost with that kind of group, or, I don't know what kind of other external pressures there are, because they're not all, Hoka athletes. They're not all Rabbit sponsored athletes, or, I don't think there is a unifying sponsor between all of them.
Right.
Maybe Squirrel's Nut
I
Butter
think Squirrel's Nut
might
Butter
be,
may be the only one. Yeah.
might be.
Yeah.
But we've also seen that it can exist where athletes of multiple groups can train together and make content together.
Hmm.
So like I think it was like the team, like the Boss Hard team. Um, they're normally out of Boulder, but when they were down in they did like a couple of training camps in Arizona over the last year, and I think what's the company that makes those weird rolling sticks? It looks kind of like a spider or something like that. Anyway, there's
Oh,
like
yeah.
a recovery roller tool that
Hmm.
sponsored all of those athletes
Hmm.
and sent out camera crews and followed them and made like a series of 4 or 5 videos that were really interesting to watch. And so like, it can be done, but I guess it depends on who the other kind of like sponsor players are in that, and so that could be why Jim's answer was, I mean, and again, more pure speculation was like, some of the ideas that he wants to, push forward really depend on having the right sponsors involved. So maybe
Yeah.
there's something else that's going on there that, he can't really discuss. So maybe I
Hmm.
would have got stonewalled even if I were more talented, but it's something that I just had to leave. And I was like, I,
Yeah.
what I got isn't interesting enough without me stepping all over it and just making a fool of myself. So.
No, I mean, I thought you did great. I know, and I watched. I think I actually watched your live stream first, where you kind of mentioned that you were some of the things you had just said. Like you felt like maybe you were, you could have done better. But then I listened to the interview and I thought you did great. Like, I mean, from all of the stuff I've watched on with Jim, like that's just his personality. Like, I mean, I don't think he was being like. I thought he was pretty normal with you, but I thought it was funny, like, because he was just and like I'm glad that everything came out with like him talking about Strava and everything, because I had just listened to a podcast with him, and it was a Clean Sport something podcast with Kara
Mhm.
Goucher and
Yeah.
some. Anyway, he was saying that he was like he thinks everyone should put everything on Strava. And then like a
Yeah.
month later he like went dark. And I was like, what happened? It was
Yeah.
like, I mean, for me, like I was like, okay, like either he's injured or like some sponsor or something is like uh like really like trying to call the shots here or something. But oh, what's up? We got a super chat from Graham Angus. Thank you so much. Toronto, Canada, checking in. Two of my favorite YouTubers in one place. Loved both of your coverage of Western states. Keep up the great content. Thanks, Graham. So
Awesome,
why
Graham.
don't?
What's up, man?
So how did this whole Western states thing happen for you?
I got an email from Hoka, and they were like, "We're looking to bring in YouTubers or social media people to cover it a little bit differently than the way things are normally covered." And so they were like, "Would you be interested in coming out and doing tell whatever story you want to tell when you get out here?" And so I was like, "Yep, I want to do that." And
That's
so like
awesome.
the thing is like I've been working with, I've been trying to go to a couple of different Hoka events, but they all kept either like canceling or like I couldn't go for whatever reason. So like one was work got in the way, like the first one, and the other was they were gonna do I think it's probably okay to talk about it, but they were gonna do an Ekiden style event in Los Angeles. I don't know, I don't remember if it was like connected with a shoe launch or what, but they were going to do this and have a whole bunch of like their pro athletes come in, and it was going to be a big event, but it was going to be like June of 2020. And so like I was ready to go to LA for this event. I was really excited. And obviously that one couldn't happen. And so like there's been a couple of things that I've been trying to connect with and go to a Hoka event, like travel to it to cover. And so when this one finally happened and it looked like we could do it, I was super excited to be able to go and get out there and do it. And they were like, we'll have people to drive you around. So like I didn't have to rent a car or anything like that. And I wasn't familiar with any of the aid stations. So they had someone that was familiar with like, where to go, how to get there. Um, that took care
Yeah,
of
that's
all
one
those
thing I was going to
logistics.
ask you about was
You know.
if you had like a handler or something, someone like showing you around.
Yeah, I mean, I had some very good Sherpas to
Yeah.
help me navigate it, and we had media credentials through Western states
Mm-hmm.
as well, with Hoka being a sponsor. So like we were able to pretty much drive down to the closest point, closer than most like crew teams could go. So like we didn't have to ride any of the shuttle buses or anything like that. We could get, except at Michigan Bluff. They wouldn't let us do it at Michigan Bluff, but everywhere else they would
Mm.
let us get really close. Like at Rucky Chucky, for example, like that, like there's like that 2 mile like straight downhill of like a hike if you were to hike it. We just drove. Most people take that bus, that crazy bus that goes
Yeah.
down like that
Yep.
really narrow road. We were able to just drive our car down there and park right basically at the riverbank. So that was really nice too to be able to have that for someone that like I easily could have like just gotten lost like in the details of just trying to navigate that. And so having that like
Mm-hmm.
taken care of for me was really nice. So yeah.
That's awesome. So what'd you think of the ultra scene at Western States?
I mean that energy is just unlike anything else that I've seen. So like it is like a big family gathering, and the, like it's also so intimate, but also so grand. Like just the scale of this race is unbelievable because it covers 100 miles, right? And like at
Mm-hmm.
every point, um, like everyone's needs are absolutely taken care of. Like here's an example of like the ludicrous level of like attention to detail this race can put on, right? So I was just watching your video today from the race, and you're talking about pacing your friend John,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, all he wanted throughout the night was coffee and bacon.
Yeah.
And you got to an aid station, and they were like, what do you want? And you're like, coffee and bacon, please. And they said, we
Mm-hmm.
don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
And you responded like, what? Like, at what point in the middle of the night, in the middle of wilderness, would anyone be upset that a place doesn't have coffee and bacon at the ready? But that's how
Yeah.
much attention to detail of what like ultra runners need does this race like pay?
Yeah.
And so then the option was like, well, how about a salted potato? And they're like,
Yeah.
here, right? And you're like, is it hot? And they're like, no. And you're like, never mind then, right? You were really
Yeah.
nice about it. But that's just how well stocked these aid stations are because they've been doing it. They know
Mm-hmm.
exactly what runners need. And you
Yeah.
come into the aid stations and you're just like, he needs ice thrown down his pack, and I
Yeah.
need coffee and bacon for him too. And maybe if we could get some goo roctane. And I'm like, there's no running store in the
Right.
world that could accommodate any of these, even like at its most well stocked. But these aid stations, they know what's coming and they know how to take care of people, and they could do it. And extrapolate that out for 100 miles of some of the more, for me, people call Western States a runnable race. But as far as I'm concerned, this is some of the most rugged terrain I've ever seen. And so, like, I don't even know how you got ice there, let
Yeah.
alone a salted potato, cold or not. That's amazing. So,
Yeah.
like, that's how much attention they put into it's a reflection of the amount that they care about the runners and this race and this atmosphere. And the fact that a lot of these people are volunteering to do this is just
Mm-hmm.
amazing. And so that's the energy that goes into this race. And that's why people spend years trying to get into it. That's why
Mm-hmm.
people, will step up to the line, even if they know it's going to be a near record breaking level of heat on that year, and still do it anyway because they know like this is my shot, this is my chance to partake in this ritual. And I think that's just really fantastic. There's not a lot of things in life in terms of like the comforts of the 21st century. There's not a lot of experiences in life that we can have that are like that, and that's I think what makes it really unique. And the fact that it's not like a other events where, they yell at you and they're like, screaming at you to finish and cross the finish line, that everyone's there supporting you and lifting you up.
Mm.
It's really just an indescribable feeling to be able to witness that And that was like, I really hope that that was some of the energy that I was able to convey in my coverage of the event.
Yeah. Well, man, that's so cool to hear you say some of that kind of stuff, because that's that's one of the reasons why a lot of people get into ultra running in the first place, because of the community, and just because of just how great the people are at these races and the people that you run with, and just hearing you say stuff like that is it's just so cool. Because I mean, yeah, you went to probably the most one of the races in the world that almost everybody wants to get into, and incredibly hard to get into, but yeah, and also one of the biggest. And I mean, not all of them are like that. A lot of them are there's some John. I mean, John could tell you some horror stories of ultras that he's been to where you get to the aid station, it's not even set up yet. In fact, I think that actually happened to Jim Walmsley 2 or 3 years ago, actually, at Western States. He got there early and they didn't have anything ready. But yeah, that's so cool to hear you say some of that stuff. Also got a super chat from Ray Solers. Thank you, Ray. He has a question, and then we can get back to Western States stuff. Does running on trail surfaces complement road training, and how do they work together? So why don't you take a stab at that first, if you would?
Yeah, I think it helps in a couple of ways. One is it's a softer surface for the most part. I mean, I guess it depends. If you're, scrambling on rocks at the top of 14ers in Colorado, I don't know that it's necessarily softer. But, for those kinds of trail running that I saw out at Western States, when you're on buffed out roads or access roads, it's a softer surface, so it's going to be easier on your joints. So you can put in those miles, and they won't be beating up on your body quite as much. The other thing is that it also helps strengthen a lot of different muscles than you might not normally address if you're always running just flat and fast. And so I think that also helps too in terms of your overall running fitness and making sure that you're a well-rounded runner and capable of handling the loads that, say, a marathon or a half marathon training block can give you. So I'm a convert. I enjoy it quite a bit, even though I get hopelessly lost every time I do it. But I enjoy it, and even to incorporate it into my marathon and road racing, it has been really useful for me, I think.
That's awesome. And I mean, I totally agree with everything you said. I've, found that a lot of times when I am doing a lot of trail running, especially vertical up and down, it helps protect against certain types of overuse injury, because you're using a lot of extra stabilizing muscles that you don't typically use when you're just running flat and fast, like you said. Yeah, I think so. So back to Western States and Hoka and all that. Did they present you did they ask for deliverables? Did they need anything back from you, or was it just go out and do your thing? We just want to support you and get you out at this race.
They didn't. They didn't. So the people that I was working with that invited me to this event in this way, they kind of know how I normally operate. So it wasn't like someone new from Hoka was like, hey, there's this guy on the internet that makes a lot of good Hoka videos. It was someone that I had a relationship with. And so
oh, nice.
They knew my general approach. And they were like, you tell us where you want to go. You tell us what story you want to tell. And they're like, what, we can drive you there. We could help you get there. If you need help planning, to tell any of the certain narratives that you want to tell, we can do that too. So I didn't have to, there was no we're hoping to get one video and then 3 interactions on Instagram where it's supposed to, there was no nothing like that. I didn't have to submit it to anyone to approve it. I mean, my video came out before the race was over.
Right.
So there was no way that anyone that was capable of reviewing it would have been able to get it back to me fast enough. So they were just at the finish line, we made the choice to leave after Jim crossed the finish line. And that was a tough decision to make, but I'm like, we can go back and put out this content fast,
Mm-hmm.
or we could stay and capture a lot more. And I was like, I don't know how to decide that right now, but I felt like, this footage was like burning a hole in my pocket. And I was like, I got to get this out.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe that was the wrong choice because I could have still got the footage out reasonably fast and still captured a lot more things too. But they were like, "We'll stay if you want to stay. If you want us to drive you back, we'll drive you back. Whatever, you guys are calling the shots here. You guys tell us what you want to say." So I really appreciated that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, by doing that, you kind of turned into like the news for a lot of people because you were this is newsworthy. Like this is like people are going to be watching this to see what actually happened, and like you were probably one of the first videos like to go up, like you were saying, like it was up before the race was even over. So
Yeah. I mean, I'm faster than I'm good when it comes to making videos. So like if I sat on it for another, 12 hours, it wouldn't have gotten any better. So
mm,
that's just like the limitations of my skill set. And so I'm like, might as well work on that, and that's kind of could be an area where I excel. So I was like,
yeah.
I'm itching to make this video. Like, I had a lot of time to sit at the river, waiting for runners to come through. And I was like,
Mm,
in my mind, I was already pre-editing it a lot. And
mm-hmm.
so, I was ready. I'm like, this is a good place to kind of like wrap up this story. He came across the finish line. He got the three-peat. It's historic. Um, and he had a really nice speech, like ready to go. He says it was impromptu, but I'm like, he's got to be thinking about that at some point in the last 10 miles. Like, what am I going to say? But, so I'm like, this is a really great place to end it. And I was like, and then how do I even then like pivot to the other stories? It would just seem like a weird,
Mm-hmm.
like coda at the end of the story,
Yeah.
like, I had a hard time wrapping my head around it, especially given the footage that I knew I didn't have from the
Mm-hmm.
day because of the other decisions that I had made in terms of like, when do we leave one aid station to go to the next spot? So I knew I didn't have a lot of the other footage to tell all those other stories because I had basically been chasing Jim the entire day.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. I mean, I think, I think that when you're doing documentary stuff like that, sometimes the day or the circumstances like just tells the story for you. And like you were kind of like in that position where you were just like, all right, I just got to get this out. But I think you did. I think you did a great job. But
Thank you.
Dave says someone needs to start an ultra running podcast called Coffee and Bacon or a Salted Potato. It's awesome. Brian Steinberg runs too much, says Western States is such a great event. I ran in 2015, paced in 17, and I have 32 tickets in the next lottery. Awesome. Well,
Whoa,
you should be getting there soon, man. Again.
cool.
Ultra Running Adventures has a question for you. For ultra 100K or 100 miles, do you count calories per hour, or do you know how much, or if you know how much? So
Yeah,
when you're running long, and this is just a general question I had for you too, are you paying attention to calories going in? Are you paying attention to carbs? Like how are you working your nutrition into your runs?
I'm still so new at the ultra distances that, my one experience, I paced it horribly. So like, I'm not a great person. I'm not a great person to ask. I have so much to learn. Most of my fueling strategies come from training for marathon training. So like, I know how often I generally like to have gels. Um, and I normally just focus on sugars and salts during a marathon. And then I kind of dial that back a little bit for a lot of my training runs. So, that's kind of what I go by. I don't normally count the calories so much. And so I think
Mm,
that's something that I'll probably have to, at least look into a little bit more as I get into longer distances beyond 50K. Is like, it's not just about sugars. It's about, other metrics as well, other things that I have to look at. So for now, I have no idea. And it's going to be probably a painful, you know, making a lot of mistakes type of learning. But for now, I'm really just used to like sugars per hour and salt per hour.
Nice. Do you have like a go-to brand or certain type of nutrition that you like?
Yeah, I mean, I use a bunch because like I just feel like any one of them, like to eat them for like even for a marathon over a 3 hour period is gross. So like I like to have a variety of things. So for marathons, for races, I like to have a couple of Martin gels just because they're pretty amazing. Like they just hit the system so fast.
I've
Um,
never tried those. I need to try those. They're pretty
it's
expensive though.
just that's the main thing. I don't
Yeah.
train with them a lot
Yeah.
because they are on the higher end of expense. And so for a lot of my training runs, I kind of fill in with other things that kind of give me the sugars and give me the electrolytes that I want, but have a little bit better of a, price per serving ratio. So,
Hmm.
going from expensive to least expensive, I like Huma Chia Plus gels. I like Unived gels a lot too. And those generally have a good number of sugars and also salt and potassium, and sometimes caffeine. And then as I get cheaper, the one that I probably use most frequently is Science and Sport because
Mm.
the price per serving is really really good, and it's also a little bit more voluminous. So like it's not like a toothpaste; it's more like a thick liquid, and so like it kind of eases the burden of how do I balance liquids and gels for this run? Because then if
Yeah.
I have a little bit more liquid in the gel, then it makes it a little bit easier. So Science and Sport, and then the cheapest ones that I tend to like are like Goo Octanes or like Cliff Shots. Those are pretty cheap, but those are very pasty, so they're not my favorite ones to eat.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you. Like I can't do the really thick gels. I tried like the thickest gel I ever tried was Muir. And I I think I bought a pack of like 6 of them and only had maybe 2. I tend to go for the ones that are easier to get out as well. I like Spring a lot, but pretty much everything you've mentioned I've tried as well. What do you so like your approach to let's talk about your training for a second. Because obviously you're training for some races coming up. What's your approach to training? Are you coached? Are you self-coached? Do you get plans out of a book, magazine? Like, do you make it up on the spot when you walk out the door? Like, what's your approach to training every day?
I mean, if I don't have a race, I kind of just do a lot of easy miles. That's like pretty much all I really do. But if I have a race coming up, I believe in having race specific training. And usually that ends up with me referring to Jack Daniels. So that's kind of
Hmm.
like, I've looked at a couple of other training manuals before, and, some that are a lot more complex, some that are a lot more straightforward. But the Jack Daniels ones, my body seems to respond really well to at a variety of different like distances as well. So like when I'm looking at running something as short as like a 5K or even like this 3K um, for the steeple coming up, it gives me some workouts that I think my body really responds to quickly. And then also for some marathon workouts or half marathon workouts, I like the approach because I think that there's an understanding that Jack Daniels plans have where, for longer distances, I really like threshold training. That's kind of like the most frequent thing that I do. I spend most of my time there, and that seems to work really well for me. And so when you look at the Jack Daniels plans, a lot of those workouts, other than like the majority, which is easy days, but a lot of the workouts are a lot of threshold type workouts. And so it just kind of like fits with the things that I've kind of figured out kind of work for me, but it has it laid out in a plan where I don't have to like, like, should I do 8 in a set or do I do 6? I don't know. Jack Daniels already has it written out and I could just kind
Yeah.
of like pick it out of there. Now, the only thing that's hard about that is like his training plans are like 20-week blocks. And I'm
Hmm.
like, that doesn't make sense for me. So I always have
Mhm.
to kind of like, you know, cut off a couple of weeks in each micro phase to tweak it to fit kind of the way that I like to put a block together. So there's still a little bit of tinkering that goes on, but as far as the workouts go, I don't really change the workouts.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like, I mean, Jack Daniels has a lot of really good stuff, and obviously he's trained some pretty incredible people. But what, talking about like when you're headed out for your run, you do all of your runs get filmed, or are there some that are just for you? And then when you are filming, like what do you take with you?
I film all the runs because it's just easier that way. That way I don't have to like decide, is this a running footage day or not?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Even if it's a day where I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to put a lot of today's running footage in the video. That's a day to kind of experiment and play around with the camera a little bit. Try some different new angles. What happens if I do this? What happens if I whip this selfie stick around this way? It's a good way to just kind of like, you know, there's no pressure if the footage is garbage or not. Um, and the other thing is, that might be the day where there's just an incredible sunrise. And so the planned video for that day might get bumped. And instead, I just make a video about how awesome a sunrise is. So like when you make 6 videos a week, you have like room to have like, right, the sunrise was really great. Isn't it great to be a morning runner? That's the video. And that's just
Yeah.
it. And so like if I decided, well, this is not a really important run day today, then I wouldn't have had the camera there. And then, yeah, that sunrise would have been just me taking it in, and that's valuable in its own right. But I also really like sharing, and so
Mm-hmm.
um, that's why I always bring the camera. And as far as what I bring, it's usually camera-wise, it's usually an action camera on a selfie stick, and that's it. So, and for the most part, I'm not filming. 90% of the run isn't filmed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, by the At this point, I've gotten pretty good at kind of like really nailing down what I want and how to get it. And so like I'm pretty efficient. So like of the clips that I have, I pretty much use every single one, and I don't have a lot that I just don't use. So like what you see is pretty much the entirety of what I filmed.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. That's really cool. I like what you said about how you take the camera out on every run. That way you don't have to decide if today is a filming day or not. Because that's something that that's like, that can create a decision fatigue sort of thing. And I have that a lot when I'm like deciding whether or not I'm going to film this run or not. But yeah. Um, and then speaking of like your videos, how many of your videos, like on percentage wise, like are planned out versus spontaneous?
I would say, probably 4 out of every 5. I've, pretty much scripted out ahead of time. And then every once in a while, I'll just be like, I got footage today. I didn't really have a shoe review or a gear review in mind. So, like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this footage yet, but I got running footage for today.
Yeah.
Um, and so that happens, probably once a week or so. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's where a lot of like the run motivation videos might come in, or like, I might do like a video about, plyometrics that day because the run video was interesting footage, but maybe I didn't really need to use it for a specific like product review. And so maybe that's a situation on that day where not a lot of the running footage gets used. So it tends to come up quite a bit, but like for me to capture the run, on the one hand, I'm very efficient with it, but on the other hand, like there are some days where I've captured an entire run and I ended up not using very much of it at all. But if I were to make a running video of that day, I had a lot of footage to put one together. And that usually happens on days where I have an event coming up and I might have to travel or something like that too.
Yeah.
So like, depending on where I am in the kind of like my production schedule, I might not need the footage for that day, but at least I have it.
Yeah. Awesome. Graham asks, Kofuzi, where do you get all the music for your IG reels?
The IG Reels, thanks, Graham. It's either music that I was listening to on the run, and so like as I'm listening to them, like, oh yeah, this is a good one. And so I'll look down to see what it was to remember what it to put it in the reel for later. Or, I've been making reels on Instagram for a while. It has a pretty good like suggestion engine. So like a lot of the first section is like music for you. So a lot of times I'll find new stuff because has suggested stuff to me, and then I'm like, oh, this actually really works. And then I'll become a fan of that artist, and then I'll listen to more of it, and then I'll dive deeper into that artist, and then you might see more of it. So it's some of it is what I'm actually listening to, and I'm driving it. Some of it I'm letting Instagram drive.
Nice. Speaking of, a lot of your videos, you do a lot of like shoe reviews, you do a lot of gear reviews. Let's pivot kind of into some of the shoes and gear that you're excited about right now. What are the shoes you're like testing right now? What are some of the ones that you find yourself reaching for? Maybe when you're not trying to test a shoe that day. What gets you excited right now with shoes?
The shoes that I'm really enjoying are the Hokas and all. That one
Mm,
just really works well for me. It's like the Torrent 2, which I really enjoyed, but it's a little bit more just like dialed in a little bit. So um, the Torrent 2 was great in its own right if you want a nice roomy shoe, but that can kind of do a little bit of everything. But if you want to be a little bit more focused, this is an all for me is like right there. So I've been really enjoying that one when I'm on trails. I've also been really enjoying the Asics Nova Blast 2
mm.
and the New Balance Fresh Foam More 3. Like those are just nice, big stack height cushion shoes where, you know, all my elements like go out the window because the shoe just absorbs everything. And
Yeah.
maybe that's ultimately bad for me biomechanically, but for the moment, it's just very comfortable to be able to go out there and get in those shoes. So those are probably the three shoes that I'm reaching for the most these days.
Awesome. How do you organize your rotation? Do you have like a plan of I'm going to run in this shoe every day until I hit a certain number of miles, or are you rotating every other day? Like how do you work that?
Well, I let the workout dictate the shoe for the most part. But that usually leaves me with a lot of easy runs and how to, like what shoe do I want to run in for the easy run?
Yeah.
And so, that's where I'll start looking at, okay, so I've got 5 easy runs this week, or maybe I have 4 easy runs that week. How do I want to distribute those miles? And so, like, if I have a new shoe, like when the Nova Blast 2 just came out, then I was like, all right, time to stack this one up against all the other daily trainers and maybe even the max cushion shoes that I have in my closet right now. So that would be like the Invincible, that would be against like the Mach 4, and so then I'm like, all right, so then I need to run in each of those shoes. So that's 2 days of running for each of
Mm,
those versus videos. So I try to like line those up. So then like, I have to do like a Tuesday and a Wednesday of those two shoes, and that becomes the versus video. And so that's how the miles start to kind of add themselves up. And then I'll look, all right, this shoe's at 80 miles. So I can do one more versus video, and then I'll do the 100-mile review of it. So like usually a lot of times my runs are about either 6 miles or 10 miles is probably the most frequent numbers that I have.
mm-hmm.
So like that I have to kind of like, save that shoe because I only get 2 more runs in it before I kind of put it to the side. So there's a little bit of kind of like, all right, where's the shoe at? But a lot of it is I got a lot of easy runs. So like, how do I want to divvy it up? And for that, I get to kind of pick what are the shoes that are, interesting to me. What are the shoes that people are asking about for me to compare? And so there's quite a bit of freedom in that.
Yeah. Lev and Martha asks, Kofuzi, are you planning on trying the Adidas Adios 6? It just became available in the US and I ordered it. The true Boston 10, not the one named that.
Hi, Martha. How's it going? Yeah. I think I wasn't going to this year, but given the way that the Boston 10 turned out, it doesn't feel like a Boston anymore to me. And I'm wondering, like, is there something in the lineup to catch up to it? You know, um, I've been thinking that the Audio 6, which kind of fell in a weird spot given the way that marathon racing shoes changed over the last 3 or 4 years. I was wondering if that would kind of move into another position, and I think it did, based on kind of what I'm hearing from other people. So it's on my list now. But a lot of those shoes, like I'm not in a marathon training block right now, and a lot of those shoes, like the Audio 6, even more testing of the Boston 10, the Rebel version 2, like all those are shoes that I'm super excited about, and I can't wait to put more miles into. But like it doesn't make sense for me to really look at them yet. Once like once the triathlon's done, then I have not only Chicago to get ready for, but also CIM. So I'll have like 2 marathon blocks kind of in a row where I'll
Mm-hmm.
really be able to dive into a lot of those shoes that are really geared for higher mileage marathon training. So it's going to be a little bit, I'll be late to the game, but I think hopefully it'll still be okay.
Yeah. And what do you look for when you're reviewing a shoe? Do you have an outline that you typically go through, that you're asking yourself questions, or is it just like this is how I feel about this shoe on this day?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I have like my normal stuff. Like I always go over the specs of the shoe when I'm approaching a review. But like I don't have a normal formula of first I do midsole, outsole, then upper. A lot of times that may be the way that I end up approaching it. Um, but I really let the shoe tell me what it wants me to say, because like if the story, like in the Boston 10, the story was this isn't a Boston. So like that's kind of like how like I felt like the story needed to be told for that shoe, because that shoe just people didn't the upper isn't the story. That's not what people need to know about when they're learning about the Boston 10. The upper is good, but like that's not the story. The story is like uh, this is what it's like to run in it, and here's how it's very different from other Bostons before, and what does that mean? So like the shoe kind of dictates an interesting shoe will dictate how the video goes. So it's not always a set formula in like the after I get to the specs section of a video. Um, Sometimes I don't talk about the midsole all that much. I might talk
Yeah.
about some other things that really jump out at me. So
Mm-hmm.
um, that's the kind of way I approach it. So like as I'm running, those are things that I'm taking mental notes of. I'm like, what is this shoe saying? What's jumping out at me? I don't have a normal like checklist of things that I go through.
Yeah. Nice. That's cool to hear. And I feel like I kind of get that feeling from your videos, that they just feel really real, and they just feel like someone I know is telling me about a shoe. It doesn't like, I really like that. And so to hear you say that that's how you approach it, that's cool.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that it resonates that way,
Mm-hmm.
because that's always been my goal is to be like, you know, I'm just the guy in your running group that happens to have run in or showed up that day in the shoes that you were just looking at on the internet last night. And
Mm-hmm.
you're like, oh, hey, those are the shoes I was looking at. Tell me
Mm-hmm.
about them. Like, what does that conversation sound like? And I'm hoping that what I'm saying sounds like that. And so sometimes it gets real shoe nerdy, and I'm talking
Yeah.
about, oh, well, this Boston isn't Boston-y. Like, that's a
Yeah.
pretty obscure sentence to say. But people that are like super interested in the Boston 10 probably
Yeah.
know exactly what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
right? But then other times people are like, tell me about this Pegasus. What is this? That might be a little bit
Yeah.
of a different conversation. But that's like the tone that I hope, I can convey when I talk about some of these shoes is just like, you're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, hey, you got those? What do you think? And that's
Yeah.
that's the kind of hopefully that's always kind of like what I always try to come back to. Always bring it back to like, oh, hey, I was just looking at those. So
And that's probably actually how it happens too, because you Google something and then the next day a YouTube video pops up because it's Google.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Man. A couple more questions, like maybe just like
Okay.
two more, and then I'll let you
Sure.
go here. Like, so what So we're halfway through 2021. Gosh,
Yeah, I do
halfway
the
through
same thing all the
2021.
time.
What brands or products have got you excited? Is there something on the horizon? Is there a brand that you think is doing everything right, where you're just really amped up and you're looking forward to the second half of 2021 from them?
Yeah, I mean, 2021 has been a really interesting year because we've had some updates to shoes that were really successful in the past couple of years, or maybe just the last year, that are really like uninspired. But then we
Mm,
had some shoes that are coming out of nowhere that are just like, I didn't even know this was coming. I could have been excited for months had they let us know, but instead they made a surprise, and now I'm so delighted. So there's like a little bit of everything in 2021. And so I think that part of it is I haven't really dived into my favorite category of shoes, which is the marathon trainers, like those kinds of shoes yet, because I'm kind of waiting for me to be in a marathon training black to get to it.
mm-hmm.
So that being said, I'm really excited to dive further into what Adidas is bringing this year. That new Boston 10, as much as it's different, I'm still very excited to what this difference means. And then the Adios Pro 2, I got a pair at home that I'm like, I can't, I guess I could just go out and run in them, but I need to like be in the kind of right mindset for it. So there's a lot of Adidas shoes that I'm really excited about for the rest of the year. I'm also excited about what New Balance is bringing for as far as marathon trainers as well, from the Rebel 2 and the RC Elite 2, two other shoes that I still haven't tried yet.
Nice.
But I've also tried a lot of other New Balance shoes from this year too that have been really satisfying and I've been enjoying quite a bit. So I feel like those are probably the two brands that I think are going to have the most, I think, exciting years. But it's
Mm,
also a really great year for Asics. It's a really great year for Hoka. It's a great year for Saucony, which is weird because it's like no one's excited about Saucony because the updates aren't huge.
uh-huh.
But those shoes are still so good that they
Yeah.
made last year, the Endorphin series, that I feel like it's still like an exciting year for Saucony. So like everyone's doing really, really well. And so there's just so much for me to be excited about.
Nice. I'm waiting for the next colorway for those Sauconys to come out.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But then I also have a
The checkered flag's not doing it for you?
no. I mean, I have others that I can get to before
Yeah,
then.
yeah,
Like I've
yeah,
got a pair
yeah,
of you mentioned the Rebel V2s.
yeah, yeah,
Probably do my first run in those tomorrow.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, I can't wait to see what you think.
yeah, thanks, man. I just finished up 100 miles in the Nova Blast
Hmm.
2. So
Hmm.
those were good. I'll be working on a video for that very soon.
Cool.
But
Very cool.
well, thanks, man. There's a couple funny things in here. Lev says Kofuzi the shoe whisperer.
Yeah, I gotta
Definitely,
talk to it.
definitely agree with that. And then Lewis says that's why we follow Kofuzi, because he isn't selling a shoe. He's telling you as if he is a friend and just how they are.
Cool.
That's cool. Well, thanks for being on, man. Like I said last week when I was talking to you, I've learned so much from you, and just really like what you're doing on YouTube, man. But last question before I let you go, and this is just so people can get excited for your video tomorrow. Give us a preview of what it's about. If
Tomorrow's
you know,
video?
yeah, if you know.
Yeah, you know what? I'm not sure that I'm going to get to tomorrow's video. Tomorrow might be a day off. But the next video
Oh,
is going to be on a couple of pieces that I've been running in from Rabbit. So I've been
oh,
looking at some of
nice.
their summer stuff. Unfortunately for me, I bought all this stuff and I've been running in it, and then all of a sudden, like I saw this stuff that Eric Sensman's. It's not an Eric Sensman collection, but Eric Sensman's kind of been pitching a lot of this stuff. He's been in a lot of the promo shots for it. And then you got the Hayden Hawks collection
Yeah,
and
I
the
just saw
Amanda
that too.
Basham. No, I'm not going to run in the Amanda Basham collection because it's not for me, but it's a women's collection. But like then they made all this other really great stuff, and I'm like, that should be the story, but I'm like, maybe that's another story a couple of weeks from now. But so tomorrow I'll be, or the next video, I'll be looking at some rabbit gear. you guys have probably seen it already in some of the videos, but I'll be kind of going over it in detail.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, definitely check that out. Thanks to everyone that stopped by. Thank you again to you, Mike, for stopping by. Stay on for just a second after this is over, and we'll wrap up. But yeah, that's it for tonight, guys. I will see you again soon. Kofuzi, last words. Thanks for stopping by.
Well, thanks everybody. And if you guys aren't subscribed to Ryan already, please make sure you do that so that way we can help his channel grow as well. I've been also looking to Ryan for inspiration and also to kind of like satisfy that itch for great running content. So I'm glad to see him in this space and in this community as well. So the admiration is certainly mutual.
Well, thank you very much. And again, I think I mentioned this at the top, but if not, all of Kofuzi's links are down below. So go check those out. Follow him on YouTube, Instagram, Strava. I think Twitter's on there too. So, all right. Thanks everyone for stopping by. I don't know if this video is actually going to play when I hit this button. So if not, I'll just end the broadcast and we'll be back to our regular videos next week. So thanks everybody.
Right.